Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. True. That's true. That's very true. You got 1 minute, guys.
It's once a year, it's on this week, when everything's alright. Don't be shy, just take a peek. This care's in the air tonight.
I've walked these halls, I've seen these signs, the words running through my head. Now I'm trying to keep in mind what Mr. Clark has always said. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Brotherhood, sisterhood, we hey. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Brotherhood, sisterhood, we hey. Take the time, and I'm sure you'll find it's really cool when you're high. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Brotherhood, sisterhood, we hey. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Brotherhood, sisterhood, we hey. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Brotherhood, sisterhood, we hey. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Brotherhood, sisterhood, we hey.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Way to get us started here. So good morning, and thank you all for joining us for the 25th year of Brotherhood-Sisterhood. As you may know, this is actually the 26th year of this special week of events for us. However, exactly 1 year ago, we were forced into an extended school closure due to the COVID outbreak. So we're thrilled to be back this year, albeit with modified plans. Every year when we survey seniors as they exit FHS, we ask, what are some of your favorite memories? And what do they include? And without fail, most students highlight Brotherhood Sisterhood. So knowing how important this is to all of you, we're determined to make this happen this year. So before we introduce our family speakers for this year, we wanted to take a few moments to recognize the driving force behind Brotherhood Sisterhood throughout its profound history. So Mr. Provenzano is here to present Mrs. Tandoy with a special plaque on behalf of the grateful school community. Mr. Provenzano and Mrs. Tandoy, can I have you come on up here, please?
Mrs. Tandoy, thank you very much for joining me and giving me the honor to stand beside you. 25 years, you know, that speaks to an enduring legacy. 25 years of talking about being civil towards each other, having awareness of our surroundings and how we treat each other, respecting and honoring, and also embracing our differences. If we go through our Fairport schools and that's all we get, that is enough. That is enough to make the world a better place. And I know that that is what's in Mrs. Tandoy's heart. For 25 years, this message has resonated in her, and everything that she has done, and I've had the pleasure of knowing her 15 of those 25 years, this has been at the core. Care has been at the core of her priorities and high expectations for our students and our community. Without further ado, I would like to present this plaque honoring you, Mrs. Tandoy, for all of your dedication and commitment to brotherhood, sisterhood, and the care ideals. We are grateful and we're proud to serve alongside of you. With much love.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All I can say is it has just been a pure joy having the opportunity to work with everyone in Fairport for 25 years. Thank you.
Sort of took Mrs. Tandoy by surprise with that one. So we're going to jump in now and right into our introductions. And so I'm going to be introducing Ipange Akile, and then Mrs. Tandoy is going to introduce Caitlin Cachulova. So Ipange Akile, where do I start? I'm currently a senior at Yale University. We woke her up early today, although you couldn't tell. I'm sure Ipange always looks fantastic and is ready to go. She's currently finishing up her studies of environmental studies, recently accepted into a grad program, but I'm pretty sure based on our last conversation, she's going to be taking a gap year, which is something that they encourage so she can get a little life experience. Although a life experience is what Ipange has. She's made the most of her experiences at Yale, just like she did at Fairport High School. If I think I have this right, but I'm pretty confident she's part of the Yale Orchestra, and she's the stage manager for the Yale School of Music. And she was most recently highlighted, I don't know if you guys had the opportunity to see this, on the NFL Countdown, which was really, really special for us to see one of our own shine like that in front of a national audience. But while she was at Fairport High School, first and foremost, she was a proud urban suburban alumni. She made the most of this experience in the program. She had all state honors while she was here, studying in Fairport High School. She played at Carnegie Hall. And in talking with Mr. Osterling, one of her teachers of many years, he said, what set Ipange Akile apart is her leadership abilities. She's extremely focused. And she's described to have, it was in her nature to lead, and that she was a good friend. And so, you know, it was my distinct pleasure to work with Ipange in my years as her principal, to see her highlighted. And one of my best memories of Ipange is her last year here in the Prisms concert. I think she performed 9 or 10 times with different students, and it just showed what a compliment she was to other people and how she highlighted her own talents as well. And so I'm really, really thrilled to introduce Ipange Akile, and I'm going to turn things over to Mrs. Tandoy to introduce Caitlin, whom I know briefly, but also had a great time getting to know her over the last few months. Caitlin?
Good morning and happy Brotherhood Sisterhood Week. It's my privilege to introduce Caitlin Cachulova from the class of 2008. I had the pleasure of working with Caitlin as a leadership asset facilitator for 4 years. Caitlin has always stayed in touch, writing to me how assets was one of the best those words into action. She lives civility, awareness, respect, and embracing others. She lives that it isn't just become ingrained in your heart as part of your journey through life. So thank you for your role modeling, Caitlin. You are one of the many Fairport graduates that we are so proud of.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Chandoy.
And thank you, Mr. Clark.
I apologize. I was actually cutting in and out, so I'm sure you said really great things. But I appreciate that, and hopefully you all can hear us. I think I can speak for Apange and myself. We're both very excited to be here. It's nice to come back. And yeah, I guess we can jump right in. How are you feeling, Apange? Are you ready?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little surreal to be, not talking in person, but to be, hearing the voices of the administrators that I know, and haven't heard in a long time. Very excited.
Yeah, me too. Why don't we go ahead and jump right in? The way that we're going to do this today, since there's two of us, is we'll be able to have more of a conversation, which is great. And so we'll be asking each other some questions and talking about what our experiences were like growing up in Fairport and what we think legacy is and what we want our legacies to be or hope for them to be. So I'm going to start with questioning Apange. Apange, what was it like for you? I know we just heard some of your incredible background and we know that you were very involved in the music program and did urban suburban. What was that experience like for you growing up in Fairport?
Yeah, so like you said, like Mr. Clark said, I was an urban suburban, meaning I woke up at 4:45 every morning, which sounds ridiculous now because I can't even get up for this. But was on the bus, got to school maybe half an hour early, and went through my day. And my day never didn't end until maybe 9 o'clock at night, after lessons and rehearsals and the like. So I am extremely grateful that I got the opportunity to go to Fairport. My father originally wanted me to go to Pittsford because of a couple of my cousins ended up there through urban suburban, but Mr. Green at JA picked my file and said that I should come to Fairport. So yeah, I overall had a fantastic time. I have very, very, very few bad memories, or not even bad, perhaps negative memories. I had the support of all my teachers. And I'm extremely grateful to have had the support of Mr. Osterling, the music department, and everyone else that taught me. But yeah.
How do you think your background or your upbringing got you to where you are today and kind of made you who you are today?
So I can't say anything about my upbringing without mentioning my father. He is a Cameroonian immigrant and is very, very strict, very, very demanding of me and my brother. And it was all out of love, all out of trying to get us to be in the best, to have the best background possible in order to succeed the rest of our lives once we left home. And he was the one who started me in music. He was the one driving me to and from school, rehearsals. And as many times as we did argue, fight, many tears were shed. I know that everything he did, everything he said was out of my best interests. And this also caused me to be as hard on myself as he was on me. Basically throughout high school, I really never stopped to think about myself or my own feelings, because it was just go, 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 try to do as much as possible. So I have as many things under my belt as I can before I left school. So yeah, my upbringing has everything to do with, my parents have everything to do with where I am now. And I'm so grateful for them for doing that. As miserable as I was at some points, they really, I mean, I think I turned out okay. So
I'd say. So obviously the world today, especially this past year, is way different than anything that any of us have ever experienced. And I know something that I've been reflecting on a lot is just how tough it, I'm sure, is for all of the kids, all of you who are in school right now going through this. Truly, I commend you, teachers too, staff, everyone. My parents both work in the schools, and so I've seen it firsthand, just how much of an impact that can have. And I'm just wondering, how do you think the experience that I guess you had growing up when you did, going through Fairport when you did, compares to today, if you could make that comparison?
first of all, I have grown as a person substantially since being at Yale. And part of that obviously is being outside of the Rochester bubble, outside of the Fairport bubble, and meeting people from all over the world, all different walks of life, wealthy, poor, rural, urban, everything, meeting people from all walks of life. But I will say, I mean, a very, very stark difference from my life now and my life then is just the influx of information that I'm absorbing in terms of media, news, current events in general. I had a general knowledge in high school, but I was not thinking about the world outside of my own. And now, of course, I'm environmental studies, so there's no way that I can think about just myself. Since I'm doing environmental justice as well, it's very people oriented and has everything to do with the general population or vulnerable populations. But I think, and I'm sure this is the same for most people, just because, I mean, technology has advanced so much since from like 10 years ago. So everyone is taking so much more information, and that has caused me to reflect a lot, especially during the pandemic when I wasn't really doing anything. My summer internship was canceled. All these things, when I had the time to really think and analyze myself and all the experiences that I've had, that I've gone through college, but also through high school. And so I guess I've become more retrospective in especially the last year. And I mean, I had my ups and downs. There was an entire month in which I was quite miserable just because I was getting in my head thinking about everything that's going on, and my complicity or my role in those things. Now, maybe not directly, but indirectly. So, yeah.
How did you manage that? I feel for, the folks, especially that are in school right now that are dealing with this. You're constantly on a screen. If when I was growing up, and this was going to make me sound so old, but like all this stuff was just starting out. And so you know, we were probably the first generation really to have cell phones even. And my notification was, I would have my poor mom, because we would do work at the table together. And I know my phone would just be on vibrate and buzz every like however long, but I would just be sitting there doing my homework, waiting for that buzz. But that was it. And like now people are on all the social media channels. You're on a screen for school half the time. You're constantly getting inundated with this information, and it can be overwhelming. I know that even for me, like as an adult who has control over what I can and want to consume, it's overwhelming. I last week took a complete screens break for a day, and I had to do it really deliberately because that's our connection to the world. And so when you have all this stuff kind of thrown at you, like you were saying, and you had that month where it was really tough, what did you do to manage that?
To be quite honest, I don't know. This was probably the beginning of summer, so June, July, that this occurred. And luckily, being at home, being with my family meant that I didn't have to look at a screen if I didn't want to. Although I was doing remote research, so I did have Zoom meetings with, my PI and everything. But honestly, I just let myself process everything, because if I did not, I don't think I would have come to any peace, come to any conclusions about my thoughts, my opinions, my values, if I hadn't actually just let them boil inside me for a little bit. I'm not sure that's healthy. And I'm lucky that it didn't spiral into anything else. But I mean, for everyone, this pandemic has caused reflection, and for better or for worse. For me, for better, I feel like I have come to some realizations about myself and what I want my impact, my legacy to be through that month of just stewing in my brain. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't have any tactics, but it just kind of resolved itself somehow.
Yeah, and I'm sure some of the things that you did were subconscious. I mean, sometimes it can just be, like you said, letting it sit, taking a beat, taking a breath, and just sitting with it and knowing that it will pass and you'll understand it, hopefully when you're supposed to. I've been thinking about this a lot, and we can get into this more on my side, but when I was growing up, and even now, there are things that I know that it affects me. I know it makes me feel uncomfortable, but I don't fully know why yet. And so I can't resolve it. And so I've held on to those, kind of like you said, and in time, in a day, in a month, in years, literally, something will happen and it will remind me of that moment, and that discomfort that I logged, I understand, and then I can let it go. And so I think I'm sure some things that you did, you said you were with your family, I believe, at that time. That's a coping mechanism. I mean, being around people that make you feel supported, and hopefully you did feel supported and loved. I think that's really important. And that was around a time too where there was a lot happening. I mean, Breonna Taylor had just been killed. George Floyd had just been killed. Our country seemed to be coming to a reckoning. And I think part of that was because everyone was home. Everyone was seeing it all the time. There were no distractions. And so we as a nation were forced to see it, maybe more so than before. And I guess, what was that like for you? Like, did that bring up any experiences, memories from when you were growing up or even throughout college that made you maybe have that moment of needing to take a step back from things?
Absolutely. Actually, the murder of George Floyd was, I do think, the catalyst of this month of despair, to make it dramatic. But I do think what I said about not really paying attention to current events in high school did really carry through a lot of college, because I wasn't paying for cable. I wasn't watching news. I get my notifications, the headline notifications from WAPO, Wall Street Journal, and New York Times. But I mean, just reading that on the screen is not necessarily processing it and seeing it in real time. Whereas being at home, my dad always has some sort of news network on 24/7. It's either that or some sports, whatever. But in those moments, I couldn't escape. I couldn't escape watching the news. I couldn't escape seeing the horrors that were taking place. And yeah, I just having to actually reckon with those things, even though I was in a supportive and familiar environment. Well, actually not familiar, because my parents had just moved houses. So I was living in a completely new house. And so that must have contributed as well. The stress of not being in a very familiar place. But I mean, reflect back on high school, and especially with racial injustices, I remember, I'm obviously not going to name names, this teacher that I had for as a study hall monitor, whatever, I think my sophomore or junior year. This just during this month, this memory came back to me. So I had kind of put it away in a vault in my head or something. And this study hall teacher was, for whatever reason, very hostile towards me. I would leave every 4 days whenever I had study hall I would get a pass from one of the music teachers and go down to the music wing just to hang out with them, just to talk. Because that's where I felt comfortable, or most comfortable. And that study hall classroom was not it. And this teacher was incredibly hostile towards me, really opposed me leaving. I guess they thought I would be loitering around, causing trouble, some kind of deal, because they knew that I was an urban suburban. Of course, I'm visibly Black. And I just couldn't understand why this teacher was so had these feelings towards me and calling me rude and everything. And then this went on for a semester, however long. And I guess, yeah, the next year, so I guess this must have happened junior year. The next fall, I get into Yale early, and there was an immediate switch in this teacher's behavior towards me, saying that, congratulating me, saying that I'm super intelligent, all these things. He also said these things to my brother when my brother went through Fairport, went through FHS, and I had not really understood why there was such an immediate switch between this hostility to this niceness that they showed towards me. And I mean, this is one of a few instances in which I had not really reflected back on until very recently. I thought my experience was normal. My Fairport experience was normal, but just based literally on the color of my skin, there were teachers and students who who expressed some sort of disdain towards me. When I got into Yale, people who I thought were my friends had said whispers. I heard this through the grapevine. Of course, they were not said directly to me, but, oh, you got into Yale only because you're Black. And I mean, I was very hurt. Of course, like part of it, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, Yale does want to do better in terms of its demographics because it's an old elite institution, which, has this image of being for only white, affluent students, but that's not the case. But still, I just couldn't understand why it was my Blackness that drew this this hostility among other students, people who I thought were my friends. So yeah, I've reflected a lot on experiences in college as well. Like I said, it's an elite institution, primarily, has this white facade. But there are many stories there, but yeah.
Yeah, and I've experienced that too, to my face though. And
Yeah.
there's moments where you think about it for yourself, right? Because like you said, there may be some element to truth to that for systemic reasons, but also like, I'm smart. I work hard. I worked for it. And I think it takes a lot of finagling and inner work, like figuring that out for myself to stay confident in my own abilities and to not let that stuff shut me down and not think that it was some sort of a handout or given to me just because of what I look like or just because of my background. That's not true. And I can share a recent example.
Yeah, I'm assuming this is about Georgetown law, the professors. That just happened on Thursday, right? I mean, it was in the news last week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for those of you who may have seen it, I know it was in the Democrat and Chronicle because my parents took a picture and sent it to me. But there were two professors that were on a Zoom call with students presumably before, and then the students got off and they had kept recording, which is a lesson in technology. As we know, we need to be very careful with it. But we really just shouldn't be saying these things anyway. So the one professor was talking to her colleague and saying, there are just some students in my class who they'll basically like explain something to me and then I have to ask them to explain it again and it's just jumbled, and some are just very low and it fills me with angst because those who are low are quote unquote Blacks. It's usually the Blacks, and some of them are good and do okay, and a lot of them are just not. And of course I'm paraphrasing so people can take a look at that if they want. And so, yeah, people, you can have a gut reaction when you watch this video, but what I want to talk about is what my experience was like with this video. So I get it sent to me by someone that I know, and I realized I had them. Like, those were my professors. And the kind of irony is that they teach a negotiations class. So negotiations is basically you try to get something from someone else and they try to give something to you. So it may be some sort of compromise. And it's very subjective. It's not like you can take a multiple choice class or multiple choice test really for this negotiations thing. Someone has to watch you. And negotiations is all about relationship building and trust and getting the person who is on the opposite side of you to kind of trust that you'll stick to your word and you're going to give something up so that you can also get something from them. And so they really have to watch the interactions of people, which means that a lot of it is about perception and how people perceive you. And so you have two professors who are having this conversation about how they grade, essentially, right? Because this is how it translates, how they grade people who they perceive to be a certain way and who they perceive to have skills in a certain way. And the thing that I think is interesting is because, you know, those of us who society perceives as slightly different, we already have to navigate, we already have to negotiate our lives kind of all the time. And so it may be that those teachers just didn't get it. They didn't get that some of their students came in with maybe actually stronger skills or like real life skills than they had. And that's not to undermine her 30 years of experience, but like, I think this just proves how we can get lessons from different points in life. I mean, that's what Mr. Clark was saying about you, right? When he introduced you, you come with a lot of life experience. So let me take a step back again though. Like I said, these were my professors. I'm Black, but I don't always present as that, or people may not always perceive me as that. I have no idea how I was perceived in that class. No idea. I know when I took it, it's a weekend class. So yes, when you get older, you can take weekend classes and just knock it out. So it's 2 weekends, I just knocked it out because I was in a clinic, and I was a clinic in law school is basically you're practicing as a lawyer, and I was representing kids, youth, high schoolers in court in delinquency proceedings. Most of them were Black. They were, you know, kids that got caught up in the juvenile justice system, whether it was on them or not. And so my focus was on them. My focus that semester was to make sure that they were good, that their lives were as solid as possible. And I don't remember that negotiations class that much, to be honest. But now I'm kind of like sinking myself back into that moment, thinking about how did they perceive me? I did well, you know, if I did not as well, would I be more angry? I don't know. Did I do well because I was not perceived in a certain way because I got to pass? There's this, you know, concept called passing, and it's when you may be one thing, but you're not perceived as such. So did I pass? And that's why I did better. I don't know. And I've literally, I mean, I'm not happy it happened. I am from, you know, to the extent that now, hopefully it doesn't affect people's grades moving forward. But for me personally, I'm grateful that it happened when it did. I'm grateful it happened 4 days ago, so I can come here raw and share that experience with all of the people watching this, because this is what that does. And students find stuff out, whether you mess up on a Zoom or whether you have a chat with a coworker in the hallway or you say something in another class. I know I was talking to you about this before, but you know, this made me think back to a time that I had at Fairport where I was in a class that I struggled with. Like it was really hard for me. And I'm lucky that I had friends that were better at it. And so we would like do our homework together. And one of my friends had the class later in the day. So I had it early in the morning. He had it later in the day. And he was telling one of our friends, he was like, yeah, me and Caitlin were up late last night trying to do the homework. Like we couldn't really figure it out. And the teacher said in passing, but it was in front of the class, maybe you should pick your homework partners better. And my friend told me that. And I was mad but I joked it off, you know, I made some joke about it. But that was like, how many years ago was that? That was like 13 years ago. And I am still unpacking that. Like, I don't know why. Like, it's not everyone has to like me. I know that. That's okay. Like, teachers don't always like students, just like students don't always like teachers. That's fair. That's like part of the world. You're not going to like everyone. I know I can be talkative. I know you know, like that's fair. I know I say this to you though. It was an early morning class, so I probably wasn't that chatty yet. So I don't know what it was about this teacher. And, you know, but as I got older and started to, you know, fall into my identity more and accept and embrace my own Blackness, then you do start to reflect back on those times and think, what was it? You know, was it something else? And I'll never know. I guess I could ask that person, but like, they probably won't answer either because maybe they don't know. So there's a ripple effect when I think something happens, and it kind of brings up these past memories for us.
Right. I guess that does kind of tie into the whole legacy concept, the word. I personally did not even come across or think about the meaning until coming to Yale, because, you know, elite institutions, there are legacies. Like, people are legacies, as in, oh, this guy I knew my first year, his great 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 grandparents went here, and every single generation ended up at Yale as well. So he was like a quadruple legacy or something like that. Which is, so like that is what my first experience was. And now I'm sure some of the teachers know this, especially the English teachers. I'm in the Skull and Bone Society, which like Tom and Daisy Buchanan from The Great Gatsby were in. But that is also like, oh, that is a legacy. You are a legacy now of this secret society and all these things. And I was like, I don't know what legacy means, really. Does it mean that my name is going to be on some sort of building? Does it mean that it's going to be listed in publications on Google Scholar? What exactly does that mean? So having to actually grapple with that as a result of doing this talk is very interesting to me. Like, what thoughts do you have?
To me, legacy is how you leave an interaction with someone, what someone takes away from an interaction with you. If we talk about it person to person, it's more individualized than I think we want it to be. There's only so many famous people in the world, right? There's only so many people who we know their names and their names are in the history book. But that doesn't mean that there's not like way more incredible people or way more people that caused harm, intentionally or not intentionally. I think that our legacies are left with each interaction that we have with another human, and it is, or animal or plant or whatever. But it is about how you left them feeling, because that's what's going to stick with you. Like the Maya Angelou quote says, you know, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And it took me literally years, I was saying this to you, years to get that quote. I knew it was a quote that I should get. I knew it was a good one because people always quote it places, but I never really felt it until now. So maybe if those of you don't get it, it's okay. Just give it some time and maybe one day you'll understand it too. Maybe not, I don't know. But for me, like, that's very real because, yeah, I remember what that teacher said because my friend told me, because that's a crux of the story. That's like important to that story. But I more remember like that sinking feeling in my gut, and then that fire that came up after, because I knew I was trying really hard. And I vividly remember that. I'm trying to think, you know, I was thinking about what I would like my legacy to be moving forward and what imprint I want to leave on people based on imprints that people have left on me. The people that I respect the most, I think, that I've looked up to or looked to see how I should act and move in the world are the listeners and are the people that are genuine and honest and open. You know, we were talking as we were prepping for this about big figures. I'm thinking of individual people in my life, you know, the person that I met, me in my office, the people on my street, my neighbors who make me feel good because every time I see them, they're smiling. Or like the person at the restaurant nearby that I've had to build a relationship with over time. Like, I respect that too, because they know what they want and need, and they're coming at it honestly and being their authentic selves. And so that allows me to do the same and humbly try to get to know them. But I know we were talking about some big figures too. Fred Hampton, a lot of people are talking about him right now because of the Judas and the Black Messiah movie that just came out. And for those of you who don't know, he was the chairman of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, who was unfortunately assassinated by the federal government. But what made him great, take aside even, I mean, you can't separate his identity. He was very much part of that. But take that aside, if that, you know, turns you off Black Panther Party, take that aside. The reason why Fred Hampton was so great, in my opinion, why I look to him, is because, first of all, he was killed at 21. So he was young. He was your age, right? He was younger than you when he was doing this amazing work. And he was able to connect people, like Black people from inner city Chicago, with white coal miners from West Virginia. So if you translate that to today, just for purposes of translating this, it would probably be like, I don't know, like white Trump supporters. Just, again, I'm just putting it in categories so we can make a comparison. Maybe white Trump supporters with, it doesn't even have to be Black, like non-Trump supporters. I'll just say it like that. Like Trump supporters, non-Trump supporters. We know what this has felt like, this kind of dichotomy over the past year, 4 years, 5 years. Bringing them together and making them recognize their common ground. That's what I appreciate about him, because in order to do that, you really have to meet people where they are. When they would have their Black Panther like meetings, when they would have these meetings, there would be Confederate flags standing in the back. And like to some, that's a huge turnoff, understandably. But he got that, like, if that's what they needed at that time, I'll meet you where you are. And let's have a conversation and break down these barriers. That's what I aspire to have my legacy be. I want it to be a bridge. I want people to know that I approach them authentically. And I know we had a conversation about what that even means. With what I mean by that is with honesty about myself. And the way that you get there is by stuff like this. I am so grateful to do this today with you, Pange, because this is part of my own healing. This is part of my own processing. I spent the past weekend, like, in so many spaces, like physically, emotionally, because I wanted this to be authentic. And that's what we have to do. It takes time to get there. So I don't know, again, going back to what we were talking about before, log those uncomfortable moments, log those times where you feel like something might be off, and then give it time. Give yourself some patience, because I promise you, if you do the work, if you intentionally say, I want to get to know myself better so that I can be better, leave the world better, engage with people better, that will come up. You'll understand it in time. You know, and we didn't even talk about, like, we're just talking about personal stuff. I didn't even talk about any of the work that I do, but that's how I'm able to connect with so many different communities. I represent people who are unhoused, who are homeless, who previously were undocumented. This was in my past job in immigration. And I haven't had those experiences. I'm very lucky. Yeah, I'm very lucky. I don't take that for granted. I haven't had those experiences, but I know that. And I know that my experience has been different. And so going at that, trying to connect with people from that place of humility, from recognizing those differences and embracing them, the E in care, that's really important. And that's what allows us to do that. The more we know ourselves, the more we can do that.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, legacy doesn't even, like, leaving a legacy doesn't even have to be huge. I mean, that just means, it could literally just mean every person that you meet has a positive image of you when they hear your name. That's basically all you can, just little things, smiling to someone on the street who looks like visibly is having a hard time, or, well, I guess you can't really do that with masks, but, you know, with you know, the smizing, but it really just, it doesn't have to be big. I mean, quick example is that one of my now really close friends, who is a year younger than me here, before we really knew each other, he came up to me asking whether I remembered the first time we met or not. And I mentioned something at the beginning of his first year, so a run-in at the music school, something like that. And he said, no, there was a time before that. And I was confused, because how is there a time before the first week of his, first year at Yale? And he mentioned, he was telling the story that during one of the admitted students days in March, in April, he his senior year, he came, visited, and I apparently let him into some building, and I had a 2-minute conversation with him. I do not remember this at all. I have racked my brain. I have no recollection of it. I guess I just, when there are pre-Frage prospective students, I don't, because they're not officially going to Yale, I don't really care, but which is not great. But he said in that moment, he said, "You were so kind and so welcoming. You ended up being one of the reasons why I chose Yale." And I mean, that was shocking to me because I fully do not remember any part of this story at all. And I was like, oh, maybe it could have been someone different. He could have mistaken me for someone else. And then I realized I that's highly unlikely. So just something as small as that, having a 30-second conversation with someone in a positive manner, that's all a legacy has to be, because that person may remember you for the rest of their life in a positive, they have this positive image of you. So at least until I develop my own real definition of what I want my legacy to be, I mean, that's at least the bottom line, just to leave this positive image of myself. Maybe not necessarily on everyone, but I hope the vast majority of people that I meet, that I interact with. Obviously, it's circumstantial. Depends on the circumstance. If I'm stressed, then maybe I may not come across as, the smiley person that I am. But yeah.
Yeah, and maybe I hope this doesn't feel like a lot of pressure on people, because we're also human and you're allowed to be. And especially this past year, but probably before that, we're feeling a lot of heat, feeling a lot of pressure from wherever. I mean, we get stressors from a lot of people. Like you said, your dad was really strict on you. For some of us, it's our parents. For some of us, it's teachers. For some of us, it's ourselves. It's media, it's images, it's thinking that we have to be some sort of way. And so just, I guess I'll leave it here too. Give yourself grace, give yourself time and patience, and forgive yourself. And it's okay to have to go back and say sorry. It's okay to make a mistake. I don't think that tarnishes a legacy. That actually, I respect that a lot, when people can own up to, maybe something that they didn't mean, they didn't intend, but the consequence of that, the way it was perceived, was harmful. So I'm excited for everyone this week to have Care Week again, Brotherhood Sisterhood Week again, in this alternate universe that we're currently in. But I do think it's kind of the perfect time to think about what it means to leave a legacy, and to recognize that it really can, like you said, Apange, it can be something very small. And that's it. And that starts a ripple effect, and it affects other people. And that's how we build a legacy. That's how we build this kind of building up. It's not an actual building. It doesn't mean it has to be this big shiny thing, but it's all those little things that add up over time, and how you make people feel, whether in that moment or later on, if you feel you need to go back and kind of close that out.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to us for the past 50 minutes and change, 40 minutes and change. Caitlin and I were so happy to, one, meet each other through this, and to really reflect back and talk candidly about our experiences here and our life experiences in general. I mean, I haven't been away from Fairport for very long, but I'm very grateful for the administration and Fairport administration and all the teachers for supporting us.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm just going to jump in. First and foremost, I want to thank the both of you for being with us this morning, taking time out of your busy lives, whether at school or in the workplace. I know you have lots going on, and we've had multiple meetings here to prepare for this. And you guys are outstanding. You really did an amazing job today. And as you're talking, there's so many things that I'm taking away from this conversation. I'll share one just very, very briefly. I've been in this business for 27 years working with teenagers, and I know that I've made mistakes along the way. And you, as a teacher, you get to experience that sometimes a year later, sometimes 10 years later, sometimes even 20 years later. You'll see someone in a restaurant or a store or somewhere, and they'll talk about those exchanges that you've had. And hopefully on the whole, they're pretty positive, and sometimes they're not, and that's okay too. As you said, I think we need to leave space in this conversation for grace and humility, and we learn and we grow. And to your point about how they catch you, depending on the circumstance, Apange, it's sometimes that part of our lives where we were coaching 3 sports and having babies and trying to keep up and grade papers and all of the things that I'm sure, Caitlin, you get to see your parents doing right now in a pandemic even, right? Is that it's been hard. But as teachers, we hold this sacred place for a lot of kids where we become their solace. And sometimes those negative interactions can leave a mark. And so that is something to remind us the power that we have in our profession. And that's why it makes it so rewarding. And it's also why we hurt when we hear those things too, because we didn't, to know that something like that happened I would like to think that if I knew about it, I would do something to address it. Right. And that would give me that opportunity to help kind of move you forward. But you guys are incredible, and you left an incredible mark here and added to 25 years of legacy of Brotherhood Sisterhood. And, the foundation of this experience, which is unique to our school, was rooted in a time where things weren't great at Fairport High School. And there were issues of, race and people not being considered in a loving and family way. And, as I've been a principal for 7 years now, people talk about the Fairport family, that doesn't mean anything. And, I talk about this being something that you have to be convicted about, something that you have to buy into to be part of the Fairport family. And families, as you know, are not perfect. They have their good times and their bad times. And as you said, there's that place where you talk about those things and you work through them, and there's forgiveness, and it provides hope. And that's what this conversation is every year. The Family Talk is about framing our expectations. Care doesn't only happen 1 week a year. Care is something that you're supposed to live every day. And again, it takes somebody buying into that and believing that, as you said, how you make people feel is important. And thank you for reminding of that, of that today. It meant a lot to us, again, for you to come back. We're so proud to call you Raiders, and really do appreciate you participating in this and making the most of this opportunity. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And at this point, we're going to send everybody, we're running just a few minutes late, which is pretty normal for us in the Family Talk, but we'll send you back to your normal classes. And I hope you have an outstanding Brotherhood Sisterhood week. And again, I want to say thank you so much to Mrs. Tandoy for all of your work and living your life through care and everything that you've done to make this happen for 25 years. Thank you so much.